Alright, so we've looked at clipping masks, and we've also looked at the draw on side mode, which is another version of a clipping mask. Now we're going to look at a different type of mask called opacity mask. And we access these through the transparency panel. And the process can be just a little tricky. There's a few steps involved. It's going to allow us to mask off and turn transparent an object or a group of objects at a specific point or at a specific area. So whereas using the transparency panel, let's say on one object and just adjusting the opacity on the whole thing will make it translucent, there might be times where you want just one area of this object to be transparent, but you want the rest of the object to remain at full opacity. So let's go ahead and explore that concept. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the object that I need to mask off. So in this case, it's this ghost object. Then I'm going to come over to my transparency panel and I'm looking for a button that says make mask. So I'll go ahead and click that. There's this really annoying thing that I do not like that Illustrator does, is it automatically just clips all of that out, or it's basically turning it all transparent. That's because it goes right to here, clip. Now, what we need to recognize here is that now we have two windows. We have our regular window, and then right here, this is our opacity mask window. So this is showing us where we have masked off the object. In this case, we've masked all of it off with black. So when you use opacity mask, black conceals and white reveals. Also, dark values conceal, light values reveal. So this will all make sense really soon. I'm going to go ahead and uncheck the clip. I'm going to click on this opacity mask window, and you need to make sure that this window is highlighted and not this other one. Okay, so now we are in opacity mask mode. What I wish Illustrator could do is give us some kind of indication that we're in this mode, like it does the draw on side mode, but that's just me. Okay, so now I want to mask off the bottom half of this ghost. So I want it to look transparent as it's coming out of the ground here. So I'm going to come over to my pen tool and I'm going to hit D for default colors, and I'm just going to start drawing a shape that comes up here, so under its arms, and it just needs to cover this lower part of the ghost. So a full shape. So now that I have that shape, I'm going to come over to my gradient panel. I'm going to open up the gradient panel and pull this down. Right now we're working with what our default colors were. I want to actually change this just to working with black and white. So I'll pull out my swatches panel as well, and I'm looking for black. So I'll pull that down into the gradient panel. I'll pull off these other colors, and then white. I need to make sure that those are also at full opacity. I have black and white, full opacity, and I've created a gradient with that shape. Now we can kind of see what it's doing. So where the black is, it's starting to turn that transparent. And where the white is, it's revealing it. I'm gonna go ahead and hit G for the gradient annotator, and I'm gonna pull a new gradient that moves from the bottom up to the top. So now we can see the white reveals, the black conceals. So as I move this, anywhere where we have a full saturated black, it's completely transparent. Anywhere where we have a full saturated white, it's full opacity. So I've successfully created that transparency mask. I'm going to hit V for the black arrow, and I'm actually going to take off the stroke because I don't want to have that stroke in there. So we should have something like this. Now, here's the most common mistake. You create that opacity mask and then you start to move on to other things. What we need to make sure to do is come back to the transparency panel and click on this. Okay, so it says stop editing opacity mask. I'll click on that, and now we have the whole object selected. So what's really cool about this effect or this option is I can move this object around and the opacity mask follows it. So no matter where I put it, that opacity mask will stay there. If I decide that I need to edit the opacity mask, I need to select the object, and in the transparency panel, I go back to the mask mode here in this window. And then when I do that, I can find that object again and I can modify it. So I'll go ahead and go back to normal mode, and let's try it again. So maybe let's try it over here with this ghost. So I'll select that ghost object. I'll say make mask. I'll undo the clip. Then I'll choose opacity mask mode. I'll go ahead and use the pen tool and start drawing the mask. I'll apply a gradient. I'll go ahead and set the gradient. So I'll hit G for the gradient annotator. If I set that gradient, I'll hit V for the black arrow, see what I'm working with. Okay, that looks good. Now that I'm done, I'll come back to the transparency panel and click. And then I'll move this one around. And that worked. Okay, so let's try one more. This time we're going to try a group of objects. So this moon back here, I'll go ahead and make this a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. And maybe I will rotate this just a little bit. So I'm going to select this group of objects. I'll hit Make Mask. I'll undo the clip, select the mask mode. This time I'll come over to my shape tool and I'll just go ahead and grab the ellipse tool and just draw a big circle over that shape. Okay, so that's going to be my mask. And I'll actually move this circle because I want to make sure that I don't mask this top edge. I want to make sure at the very least that this can be seen. So here's where my mask is. Click on the gradient panel and I will hit G for the gradient annotator and drag a new gradient. And this time I'm going to do a radial gradient and I'll drag the annotator down here and kind of reshape this gradient so it matches the contours of this hill. So this will be just good practice using the gradient annotator. So you can see that it's starting to mask off the bottom edge of that moon. I'm going to go ahead and pull this midway slider up a little bit more. So I want a more dramatic disappearance of that moon on the horizon. So I'll pull it up pretty far. There, I like that. Okay, so now that I like that, I'll hit V for my black arrow and I'll click back on the normal mode or out of the transparency mask mode. And now I'll just kind of move this down into place. That's pretty good. All right, so that's an overview of working with opacity masks.